All right, let's get this started. So what you're looking at here is Inkscape. I want to design a sci-fi crate that has an unusual outer texture. So I started by drawing a rectangle. I'm going to be working in inches, so you're going to see me switching things a lot. Sometimes I make a mistake and I realize I'm working in millimeters, and then I go back and I'm like, nope, need to change this to inches. That's what I'm doing right here. I'm trying to get the dimensions set properly, and that's when I realize inches. So to create an octagonal shaped crate, Inkscape has a tool for drawing octagons, but I prefer to make them myself because the octagon tool doesn't always make things level. Whereas when you draw a square or rectangle in Inkscape, it's perfectly 90 degrees oriented to the plane of the bottom of your screen. I don't know if I said that right, but it's oriented correctly. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm going to make a copy and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and I'm going to center these. Now Inkscape has this great centering tool. You can center vertically, horizontally, so horizontal and vertical. There we go. Now that I know these are centered, I'm going to union them. I select both of them and I use the union tool to combine them. Basically makes a big plus sign. And now I'm going to use the path tool to remove certain segments and add the diagonals. So you can see I clear it and then I add it. And it just basically makes a connection between whatever existing points or path points are still selected. So now I have an octagon. And once you learn how to do this, you can do this very quickly. I mean, you saw it, 30 seconds or so. It doesn't take long at all. Once I had the shape that I wanted, I shrunk it down. I want this crate to be roughly 3/4, 0.75 inches in size. So I just dragged it down there, and then I'm zooming in. I'm not making it larger again. Sometimes you'll see me shrinking something, and then I zoom in, and it looks like I'm re-enlarging it, but I'm not. I just zoomed in on the screen here. So what I did here was I'm doing what's called a dynamic inset. It basically lets you select the edge of an object and then pull in a copy of it that's equal distance all the way around. So you can see there's an inner octagon there that is the same distance from all edges. You could draw that by hand, but it's kind of a pain, not real easy to do. Now to center all the various pieces of my crate, I'm going to put a hole in the middle of all of my pieces that is 0.2 inches square. It's a small square that'll be 0.2 by 0.2 inches. The reason I'm doing this is the wood that I'm cutting from is pretty much almost exactly 0.2 inches thick. So when I cut out what I call a beam of this, if it's 0.2 inches high and 0.2 inches wide and it's 0.2 inches thick, I'll have this nice square little beam that I can insert down the center of the crate to hold everything in place so the glue dries. Now this crate's going to consist of multiple parts. I can't remember. It's either 7 or 9. You'll have an odd number of the larger outer size and an even number of the smaller inner size, which you'll see in a moment. So what I'm doing here is normally I would just make copies of the final design, but I wanted to visually see this thing and understand what it was going to look like. So I'm making copies of every other one. So it's going to go large section, small section, large section, small section. So look at it from the left to the right, and you'll see how I'm growing this crate. Now I'm just going to start making copies of the big and the small so I can speed things up a little bit. Now keep in mind, each of these sections is going to be 0.2 inches thick. So if I've got 5 sections, that's an inch. If I've got 10 sections, that's 2 inches. So right here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that right? 9 sections. So it's going to be almost 2 full inches in length when it's assembled. Again, what I would normally do here, and throughout this video, you're going to see me making changes to each of these small octagons. What I would normally do is only make 2, the big one and the small one. I would make all my designs on those and then make copies. But I didn't think of that at the time, and I also wanted you to see it all in multiple iterations. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to draw the beam that is going to go down the center of all these holes, and I thickened the line a little bit, just makes it easier to see. Once I have all of my pieces drawn in Inkscape, I'll select them all, and I will reduce all of their edges to 0.002 inches thick. You'll see that at the very end of the Inkscape drawing. But right now they're 0.02 inches thick, and that's so you can see them. When they're 0.002, they're very, very thin. What I'm doing here is I'm going to decorate the outer two sides of the crate, only the outer two. So I'm drawing some crisscross lines here for decoration. Now, with a laser cutter, you usually designate a color to represent either a cut, a score, or an engrave. Right now, I'm just designing in black, but in a little bit, you'll see me color code everything. So right now, I'm just drawing little bits of, extras to put on the crate to make it look sci-fi-ish. So I'm adding some circles here, and I'm going to draw a rectangle in just a second and put it on the bottom. You can go as crazy as you want with the greebly details. The laser can cut a very fine line or etch a very fine line. So your details, will look good. The ends, by the way, are going to be cut, the two large ends. Now here I'm doing it, I deleted it, and I'm making a copy. This is what I normally do. I do the original, and then I make as many copies as I need. I drew that in there so you could see the layout of the parts, but now you're starting to see sort of how I design. So here are all the pieces that I intend to cut. I just, there I am setting it to 0.002. And you can see how it sort of looks grayish. It's still black. It's just such a thin line that it's sort of a little difficult to see on the screen. I'm verifying all the dimensions of the squares. Now, when I made the line 0.002, it actually changed the square from 0.2 to 0.192. So I'm going back here and I'm fixing that. And what I would normally do is just do one of the smaller inner octagons, make all the sizes, the lines the right thickness, center everything, and then I would make copies. But because I had one of each, I just went ahead and changed all the squares in the center to 0.2. The little lock there means if you make one change, it changes the length and the height at the same time. So I just change it in one place and it changes both. After I do that, I've got to go and recenter those squares, which you'll see in just a second, because when you change the thickness, it changed the alignment. So I select both and I center. I select the outer octagon and the inner square and I center them on the X and Y axis, the vertical and the horizontal. And I'm just doing that to all of them right here. You don't have to do it to the end pieces because they don't have the square in the center. And there you go. Those are the 9 pieces plus the center beam that will hold it together. You save it as a file name, and off you go. Now, what I'm doing here is just some cleanup. Now, one thing that I do like to do is I like to reduce the number of cuts that my laser cutter makes. If you look at these, each one of these octagons has to be cut out separately. Now, what I just did there was I selected them all, and I turned them red. A red means cut. So everything there is going to be cut, but I want those inner lines like I'm selecting here. I'm deleting these because they don't matter. They're not going to be visible. I'm going to select the inner octagon on the end caps. Right. Let's see if I can... Oh, no, I need to ungroup it first. Ungrouped it, and I select them, and I turn them blue. So all of those pieces will be etched. And here I'm going to do it again. I ungroup the thing. Grouping just allows you to move all your parts together as a whole. But you need to ungroup before you want to make individual changes. So I made them blue, so those will be scored, and everything else will be cut. What I'm doing here is just verifying that everything is centered. Then I'm going to redraw all the pieces sort of together to keep them grouped. I'm taking all the small ones, putting them together, and then I'm going to take all the big ones and put them together. And the 2 end caps will be separately treated items. Now, why am I doing this? Because, as I mentioned, I like to reduce the number of cuts. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove the top edge of that octagon on that second one right there where I just clicked. I'm going to select the 2 nodes. I'm going to remove it, and as you see, it's gone. Look right there, it's gone. Then I'm going to take this entire thing and I'm going to move it up until it snaps and connects to the top one. So now they share an edge. It'll only have to be cut one time. I deleted these 2 because now that I have one that's got the edge removed, I can copy it, drag it down, snap it, make another copy, drag it down, and snap it. So now I've reduced the number of cuts by 3, right? 3 sides of 3 of the smaller ones no longer need to be cut because they share a cutting edge. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to make a copy here, and I'm going to remove the top. Oops, I didn't mean to make a copy. Drag it down. Remove the top edge of the octagon by selecting the endpoints or the path points. Remove it, and then it just there's a setting that you can make it to where everything snaps together to the nearest edge or points. Drag it up, and bam, it just connects. Make a copy of this one. Drag it down, and there you go. It snaps in place. Now the two, I thought about doing the beam, but the beam will just be cut by itself. It doesn't take long. And at first I thought I would combine the 2 large pieces with the other large inner pieces, but I decided against that. So what I'm going to do here is remove the top edge and just join it to its matching endpoint, and that will be the end of the preparation for the cut files that I need to do on the laser. Now to prepare for the laser cutting, you have to load the file into the software. I use a Glowforge, so what you're looking at here is the interface for designating what gets cut, scored, etc. So I'm deleting all the files except for the 2 end caps here because I'm cutting those on wood that has been painted silver. I don't want to lose the engravings or the scorings on it. If you cut and then paint with spray paint like I do, the spray paint will fill the score lines and you'll lose the details. So that's why I chose to cut the 2 end caps separately from wood that I had already painted silver. What it's doing here is it's just calculating the path that the laser cutter must follow to make the cut, and then it will give me an estimated time for the entire cut and score operation, which you'll see in just a second. Here we go. The entire operation is going to take drum roll 37 seconds. Now I'm going to turn the volume down on the laser cutter. It's quite loud, and I wear earphones when I'm in the workshop doing it. So I've turned that volume down so you can hear me speak. But as you can see, it's cutting or is scoring the outside of the octagons. Now it's drawing the circles and the lines, and it's doing the second one. There goes the second one. And then after the scoring, it will do the cutting. The cutting's a little slower, so it's finishing up the score lines, and now it's doing the cut. Now, if you watch carefully, you'll notice that that top edge of the bottom facing plate does not get cut again. There you go. It's cutting just the edges that it doesn't share. And it's done. Now I return to the Glowforge screen, and I'm going to delete the 2 end pieces, and now I'm setting the cut operation for the inner pieces. I had to rotate it 90 degrees. I use a lot of scrap wood. I try to use as much wood as I can, so you don't waste it. So I rotated it 90 degrees here so I could fit it into this piece. What you're looking at is a camera view of the actual wood that is in the Glowforge. There's a camera in the Glowforge that looks down, so it helps you sort of position things. It's a fisheye lens, so it's not always 100% accurate. As you get towards the left or right edges of a piece of wood, you can sometimes lose a little accuracy, but if you're cutting towards the middle of the wood, it's not too bad. So once again, I'm calculating the path that it will take to do the cutting. And cutting's much slower, not much slower, it's a lot slower than engraving or scoring. So it's going to take a little longer. This operation is going to take 1 minute and 19 seconds. Now again, I'm turning the volume down on the video for the cutting operation so that you can actually hear me talk. This operation is all cutting. There's no scoring or engraving. Scoring is basically making a very thin line, not too deep in the surface. Engraving, think of engraving like scoring, but it's like 3D printing. It's removing a lot of material at a very shallow depth to create an image. Like a line is a line, but if you wanted to draw like your name in bold letters, it would be really an engraving because it's just tons of lines that are butted up right against each other. So an engraving takes longer than a scoring, and a cutting takes longer typically. Well, that's not true. Depends on what you're engraving. Engraving can actually take the longest time depending on what you're doing. I don't like to engrave things mainly because it really does take a while. Now the Glowforge has different levels of engraving. There's draft and high quality and things like that. So you can affect the cutting speed and the engraving speed. You basically define the cutting speed based on the thickness of the wood. Now I'm using 1/4 inch wood here, so my speed is set to a certain value. If I was using 1/8 inch wood, I could cut that speed or increase that speed because it's not having to cut through so much thickness. There are the inner pieces, 4 and 3 large ones, and the beam. Now what I'm going to do is I put a piece of tape over the wood to protect it from the laser from getting like you can get like smoke stains and things like that, burns. So you want to remove that tape before you do any kind of gluing. So what I'm doing here is I'm taping down the side that has the tape on it, and when you pull it off, you'll get this really, really clean looking wood. You can see the cleanness there. There's the dirty side. There's the clean side. So look at the dirty side of all these small pieces. That's just from smoke from the operation. And if you want to, you could put tape on both sides to have both sides really clean, like what you're seeing here. There were the other pieces. Now the next thing is I'm just going to start gluing these pieces together. I printed that beam because since each of the odd pieces are smaller than the outer, I want to have that difference in size, visible when you're looking at the crate. So that's why I decided to use the beam to hold them all together. So I'm just taking some wood glue, and wood glue works best for the MDF or wood, depending on what you're using in your laser cutter. I use wood. I prefer 1/4 inch wood. It's more sturdy. It's got weight to it. If something falls off the table, you don't have to worry about it shattering. I mean, it can, but with 1/8 inch MDF, which is what most laser cutter companies sell, it's very thin stuff. Now, why? It cuts faster, so it's cheaper. MDF is cheaper than wood, but I prefer to do my stuff in wood because, like I said, it's heavier. It may cost just a little bit more, not that much more, but it does take a little longer to cut through and to engrave. So here I am finishing up the inner pieces, and then once those are done, the beam was shortened just a little bit so it doesn't poke out on the ends, and that allows me to take the two silver pieces and glue them to the ends. And when the glue dries, I have this nice little silver crate. Here I am just squaring everything up. All right, the thing's almost done. Next, what I did was I took some painter's tape and I taped over the two ends because I don't want to accidentally spray over the scorings that I did, the little detail bits. So I'm just going to put some painter's tape on both ends and take it outside and hit it with the exact same silver spray paint that I did to paint the sheet of wood that I cut the end caps from. Outside, and a quick coat of silver along on all the edges. And after the silver dries, I remove the tape and the crate is left over. And there you go. That is all the steps for creating a sci-fi crate.
Each month, Bexham's Bizarre RPG and Wargaming magazine provides gamers with articles, props to print and cut out for players, mini adventures, new monsters, and much more. Look in the description below for details on how to get a few free issues so you can see what you're missing.